Something's off. He's blabbing on and on. Is he high? Like everyone the way to win. Never to accept the way to lose.
What did John Milton hope to accomplish when he embarked on writing his 12-book epic of over 10,000 lines of verse? While one could speculate, Milton leaves us with few doubts as to the reasoning behind the creation of Paradise Lost. While it is common to acknowledge Milton taking upon himself the tall task of inserting the English language into the epic tradition alongside the likeness of the Greeks with Homer, the Romans with Virgil, the Italians with Dante, and more, as well as his desires to articulate his very own experiences of political and power strife within the English Civil War, his main goal is one left up to no question: to justify the ways of God to man. Milton ushers in the ultimate theodicy, helping man conceive of the most looming questions about our origins and our nature. The question now becomes, how does Milton transform ancient creation mythology that formed under Old Covenant Judaism into the formative epic that defines the Western world's entire ethos? What are the ideas that permeate themselves as universal and eternal through the narratives that are alive in our very genetics? Milton understands that our highest and most abstract representations of something is what speaks the truth of our reality on a multi-layered and dense level, more so than any singular anecdote that strives and fails to explain away the largest conflict that exists in our minds and our souls. The following explores the comparative mythology that develops Milton's framework, but also captures why his articulation of the Christian ideal is what prevails, much like Christ himself. Milton deliberately models Paradise Lost on classical epics, using mythological conventions to situate the Christian creation narrative within the greatest literary tradition of the ancient world. In the very opening of the poem, we see Milton calling upon a muse for assistance in telling his epic tale, and from the very start, opening his own theological realities to the conceptions and the myths of the Greco-Roman world in particular. Book 1, lines 6 to 10 state, "Sing, heavenly muse, that on the secret top of Oreb, or of Sinai, didst inspire that shepherd who first caught the chosen seed, in the beginning how the heavens and earth rose out of chaos." Milton alludes to the 9 muses, who and which are goddesses that exist within both Greek and Roman myths to inspire artists. While implementing this familiar convention, he transforms the notion of a muse into the contextual framework of the Holy Spirit, existing as part of the Christian triune monotheistic God. In these lines, the characterization of the muse is posited as the existence itself of order, having it not only inform him, but also exists as one and the same deity to create a cosmological universe, out of a primordial chaos. Milton opens his poem with this allusion in order to convey that the importance of this poem is not only parallel that of the story of the Iliad or the Aeneid, though instead an epic that rivals those former myths greatly, as a muse of inspiration is one and the same with the God that is identified within the Old Testament. Quote, "Oreb, or of Sinai, didst inspire that shepherd." In fact, he refers to locations in the formative Christian myths, as it also pertains to the story of Moses, who receives revelation from this same articulated muse and or the Holy Spirit. Continuing upon this idea that the very opening of Paradise Lost emphasizes Milton's attempt to relate pre-Christian myth of the West to that of the creation story expounded upon in his very poem. We see line-by-line allusions that intersect in composition and in purpose. Book 1, lines 27 through 33, quote, "Say first, for heaven hides nothing from thy view, nor the deep tract of hell. Say first what cause, moved or grand, parents in that happy state, favored of heaven so highly to fall off from their Creator, and transgress his will for one restraint, lords of the world besides. Who first seduced them into that foul revolt?" Milton, who opens this address to the Muse, understood that it was an epic invention to begin with question. Taking after Virgil, in this instance, the Aeneid, Book 1, lines 8 through 11 similarly state, "Muse, tell me what the cause. How was she offended in her divinity?" Milton crosses two competing notions of inspiration and finds a common theme that is existent universally in mythology. Divinity delivers an inspiration and wisdom beyond human capabilities. In medias res, Milton bears us witness to the tragic fall of the epic poem's protagonist, Satan. Opening with the devil himself is banished prone to the lake of fire. While many have the initial inclination to praise Milton for taking on the Christian story from the perspective of the adversary, it is with great understanding of their readers and their minds that he does this. Our tradition of seeing ourselves as sympathetic to Satan is the very thing that causes us to undervalue the impossible task Milton pulled off in his magnum opus. Milton puts the reader in a position to find attractive that which is objective evil. Satan embodies what Paradise Lost is about at its core: the modern obsession with self-invention and the consequences of denying that morality exists within the objective universe as opposed to the subjective mind. Suffering and sin are of the nature that manifests from Satan's personal intake of reality, in which good and evil are a matter of perception, not transcendence. Is the disobedient angel mostly characterized by the poet himself, requiring the expansion of ideas found in the original tradition? In short, yes and no. The name Lucifer appears in the Hebrew Bible exactly one time in Isaiah 14:12, which says, "How art thou fallen from heaven, O Lucifer, son of the morning?" The concept of Lucifer as the malevolent angel that attempts to overthrow the jurisdiction of God is one that develops over many centuries in Christian thought. The story of Lucifer is one deeply rooted in the influences of relevant Canaanite mythology, in which there are comparative parallels that can be drawn and reasonably discerned as one and the same type of representation for the transcendent spirit of evil itself that manifests in the real world. This figure, which appears in Isaiah, is originally not the same conceptually as Satan, but as a poetic allusion to a Canaanite astral deity believed to embody the brilliance of the morning star Venus, who attempts to ascend the divine mountain and overthrow the high god, only to be cast down into the underworld. Milton captures what develops as consensus in Christian thought as it pertains to a transcendent nature existing as antithetical to God, and how the reality of which is encapsulated by mythology plays out in reality for eternity. The relevance of evil incarnate through the concept of rebelling against divinity is exactly what beholds the utmost articulation of what it means to be separate from the objective good and indisputable moral order. An opponent of God is best defiled by their own hubris and tendency to attempt to bring forth into the world and unto others knowledge and or conceptions that contradict with said goodness, bearing the light, a radiance that rapidly becomes ruin. Lucifer, the figure of rebellion and perversion of light, an intrinsic symbol of knowledge, and the very burning fire that gives us observable existence, becomes Satan himself, the adversary as conceived in Job. To now look towards the inner workings of the poem's characters, Milton draws heavily on mythic and heroic models to construct Satan and the fallen angels, only to undermine those models and expose the emptiness of pagan heroism. Fallen angels are narratively compared to the adversaries of competing cultural myths time and time again. Book 1, lines 50 to 53 state, 9 times the space that measured day and night to mortal men, he with his horrid crew lay vanquished, rolling in the fiery gulf, confounded though immortal. Once again, this echoes Greek mythology, in which, much like the demons, the Titans were thrown from Olympus down to earth for 9 days, a similarity that confirms the narrative proclivity towards evil being cast out from the good, and a cross-cultural consistency on corruption falling from grace. The illusions that Milton embeds within descriptions of Satan and his peers serves as a statement of literally sending these competing notions of pagan heroism to hell, and in doing so, renders these mythological figures subordinate to the Christian God. Satan's characterization supports the idea that Milton uses non-Christian mythologies as a way of connecting our shared notions of what we can identify as human traits with the depths of his own motivations and descriptions in epic and literary convention. Satan's journey in Book 2 is the beginning of Milton setting him into the movement of a heroic trajectory. Book 2, lines 410 through 413 state, "The happy isle, what strength, what art can then suffice? Or what evasion bear him safe through the strict sentries and stations thick of angels watching round?" The isle, referring to Eden as the destination of Satan's epic voyage, is an ironic allusion to the Islands of the Blessed in Greek mythology, where gods send heroes to be rewarded with immortality. This is used to juxtapose the outcome of his epic journey, which results in the manifestation of death upon humanity and echoes the state of the fallen world. Before the embarkment of our protagonist's journey, Milton does not only craft his own unholy trinity, as in Satan, sin, and death, to oppose the existing Trinity in heaven. Instead, he conceptualizes the bringing forth of death as a literal consequence of objective evil introduced into the universe by Satan, and therefore sin as a measurement in which living things within the context of the poem and its theology may stray from God. Book 2, lines 754 through 760 state, "In darkness, while thy head flames thick and fast drew forth, till on the left side opening wide, back they recoiled, afraid at first, and called me Sin," and lines 785 through 789, "But my inbred enemy forth issued, brandishing his fatal dart made to destroy, I fled, and cried out death. Hell trembled at the hideous name, and sighed from all her caves, and back resounded death." The account of Sin's birth from Satan's head recalls the story of Athena, the goddess of wisdom, who sprang fully grown and armed from the head of Zeus. The comparison not only further challenges reconciliation between Satan's characterization in Greek mythology, but in a deeper sense puts in conversation the embodiment of wisdom as the prime characteristic of Satan, perversely. This is a clear subversion of one of the most bizarre stories we find in Western mythology, and serves as Milton's symbol of an unnatural state that exists within the poem's own cosmology, and explains that creation outside of God is not just corrupt, but incestuous in nature. Milton also reworks mythic tropes through Adam and Eve, recasting classical themes of temptation, knowledge, and fate within a Christian framework of free will and responsibility. Within Eve exists a structure of intellect that is attributable to Satan and conceptions of the self that manifests his tragic flaws. Milton expands upon his characterization of Eve from not simply laying out the narrative elements of her actions, but by putting Eve, and the wider Christian creation myth as a whole, with other adjacent mythologies to deepen the truths we see within her. Book 4, lines 460 through 466 state, "As I bent down to look just opposite, a shape with watery gleam appeared bending to look on me. I started back, it started back. But pleased, I soon returned. Pleased, it returned, as soon with answering looks of sympathy and love. There I had fixed my eyes till now, and penned with vain desire." Milton alludes to the story of Narcissus, who falls in love with his own reflected image. Milton changes the myth in important ways. Eve does not know the image is her, and leaves the lake when she learns that she is looking at her reflection, whereas Narcissus dies, penning in vain even after this realization. This difference illustrates Eve's inner proclivity to still obey God before herself, while still planting the seed of selfishness within her character, only manifested fully by Satan. Milton uses the Greek myth Prometheus to articulate a parallel and transcendent truth that is embedded within both Christian and prior pagan traditions. Both mythologies contain pre-evolutionary insights about mortality, being derived from conceptions of human suffering. Myths here prove not as lies, but as more true than truth itself, possessing within them a universal story that explains the human conditions as relevant to good and evil being a consequence of human consciousness. Lines 714 through 720 state, "More lovely than Pandora, whom the gods endowed with all their gifts, and oh, to liken sad event, when to the unwiser son of Japhet, brought by Hermes, she ensnared mankind with her fair looks to be avenged on him, who had stole Jove's authentic fire." Pandora means all gifts. When Prometheus steals Jove's fire to benefit humankind, Jove is avenged by having Hephaestus create the first woman, Pandora, who is to bring misery upon all the world. Firstly, Milton explores consistencies between knowledge in both the Greek and Christian tradition. This demonstrates that across cultures, knowledge of what we articulate as the divine is also seen as forbidden in the oldest of human stories. Perhaps that is the most explicit example in all of the poem's allusions, most effectively communicating that the possession of consciousness at a single point in human history is also a transcendent symbol for good and evil in mythologies, while simultaneously detailing a thread in the mythologies of first woman creating misery. Mythology is riddled within the very fabric of Paradise Lost, and is the underlying context that forms its profound ethos. Without Milton expertly drawing our attention to the other cultures and thereby a diverse array of stories that have developed over many centuries of civil development, we perhaps would be lost in our ability to evaluate the Christian message of the text, and in doing so, miss the grave warnings and tales he gives us about the human condition, nature, and the universe's cosmology as a transcendent and archetypal truth, rather than a subjective articulation. Through an analysis of Milton's establishing of epic conventions, the pagan heroism in conversation, Satan as a protagonist, and ultimately Adam and Eve's humanity paralleled with the figures of myths past, Paradise Lost stands not as rejection of mythological tradition, but as its theological and literary embodiment of the inherited symbols of the ancient world, which are completed and made universal with the drama of creation, fall, and redemption. I would like to briefly thank everyone for watching, as I am trying to build a community and audience of people who like to engage with similar stuff as myself. Please consider liking and subscribing to the channel, and also following my Instagram. If you have any topics or ideas that could make a video in the future, please let me know. A quick follow or subscription really goes a long way in building this channel up. Regardless, thank you all for your time, and I hope to see you in a future video.